Welcome back. This is week 10 of Fantasy Central. This is your host, Zach, and I'm here with our very own fantasy expert, the fantasy football guru himself, Jeffe.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? How are we doing this week?
How are you doing this week? How'd you do in fantasy over the weekend?
I mean, in the league I care about, my season at this point is pretty much done. I've been without my top three running backs for a long time, so it's been rough. I've gotten my ass whooped a couple times. I've been close a couple times. I actually had, if I would have played Kenyon Drake, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and there was somebody else on my bench that if I would have played him, I could have won with the way it ended up, but that's part of fantasy. You got to play all the right people.
Yeah, that's a rough. I'm right there with you. Not doing too well in that league you were talking about as well. I think it's the second most fantasy points scored against us. I think Cody surpassed me over this last weekend. But yeah, I think it was my other league. I had three of my starting running backs, two of my starters, and one in the flex, combined 5.6 points on the day. So it was pretty rough. That might have been your league. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's like, because, this week there was only, I believe it was 6 running backs that had more than 20 points this week. And, obviously one of them's James Conner. He exploded. Jonathan Taylor exploded. But other than that, it was a pretty modest week for a lot of running backs.
Yeah, it was rough. But all right, shout out to all our WUBI Live radio listeners as the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast just finished up. And here you are sticking around to talk some fantasy football with your boys. For all of you not listening on WUBI, you can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk and Fantasy Central back to back on WUBI Live Radio. The app is available for free in your app store, or you can head over to wubi.live for more information. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or simply listening on your favorite podcast platform, hit that like, share, subscribe button. Help us out. One quick, simple gesture goes a very long way, and we appreciate your support. This is week 10. So we have 4 weeks of regular season in the fantasy world left?
Yep, that's right.
All right, we're coming down to the home stretch. Many of you clinched your playoff spots. Some of you are fighting to get in there. Others, well, sometimes it's just not your year, right?
Yep, that's right.
Well, regardless, let's keep it competitive and fun. Nobody likes easy wins, so stay on top of it, even if you're out, and let's play this season through. So with that said, let's talk about today's schedule. As always, Jeffe is going to run down some guys that may be available out there on the wire, followed by his top 10 fantasy running backs and wide receivers for week 10. We'll finish up with my surefire week 10, start 'em or sit 'em. Are you ready, Jeffe?
Yep, let's get into it.
Oh, time's up. Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins. Absolute classic.
Yeah, will always be a classic.
All right. The Bears, the Bengals, the Texans, and the New York Football Giants are all on buys this week. You are in need of a solid replacement on the wire. Who are you picking up this week, Jeffe?
So I want to start with a couple quarterbacks this week, and the first one's going to be Carson Wentz, who is quarterback 10 on the season. In the last game, he got 24.18 points, and he's got a limited ceiling, but he has one of the better floors for quarterbacks in all fantasy. He has 17 or more fantasy points in all but one game this season. He has multiple touchdown passes in 6 straight games, and he has some rushing value. He'll get some yards every now and then. He'll scramble and get a rushing touchdown. So Carson Wentz, rest of the season, like I said, he's quarterback 10 on the year, which means he's a QB1. He needs to be on teams. He's, I think, rostered in 53 or 54% of ESPN leagues right now. I expect that number to jump this upcoming week. Next one here is going to be Trey Lance, which is more of a speculative ad kind of deal. He's obviously QB 36 on the year. He obviously didn't play last game, but with the Niners not being very good and as they drift out of the playoff picture and being somebody that can actually make the playoffs, I think we're going to end up seeing Trey Lance come in, and that could be important for somebody as you get into your playoff run. If you're able to throw Trey Lance in there, the rushing value that he brings, We've seen him before, and from a passing standpoint, there's definitely room to grow there, and he needs to get better. But from what they do with their offense when he's at quarterback, with the rushing value that he brings, Trey Lance is somebody that, if you have a pretty good roster, you're about to make the playoffs, and you can spare a spot on your roster, then Trey Lance is a guy I'd like to stash.
Yeah, I really like the Carson Wentz pick. I was fortunate enough to pick him up a few weeks ago. He's paid dividends. I think I started Kirk Cousins the last couple of weeks over Carson Wentz, although I believe one of those weeks, it might have been last week, Carson Wentz was the better choice to start. So I definitely like the Carson Wentz there. Trey Lance, I'm iffy on him. I don't really like to start rookie quarterbacks, but if you are in need, his ceiling is up there. You could definitely make some plays. So that may be a good pick up there. Is that all the quarterbacks you have?
Yeah, that's all for the quarterbacks this week.
All right. Any running backs you want to talk about on the wire?
Yeah, I actually only have one running back. We've talked about him before, but he's still not rostered in enough leagues, in my opinion. That's Kenyon Drake. Had another solid outing. He's running back 28 right now. He had 16 points in this last game, and he was involved in the passing game. That's what you want in running backs. And look, Josh Jacobs left that game with a knee injury. He ended up coming back in and playing through it. But I mean, it's a constant theme that Josh Jacobs is getting hurt, and if he's out of the lineup or they want to take snaps away from him, they're going to give him to Kenyon Drake. And if he's involved in the passing game, and if the Raiders get in a situation where they have to come back like they did in the game against the Giants, Kenyon Drake's going to get involved. He got most of his points late in that game against the Giants on passing plays. So Kenyon Drake, if he's involved in any capacity, again, the passing game value is what you're looking for. And with so many injuries to running backs and bye weeks that are coming in, like Joe Mixon is the number 4 running back in fantasy this season. He's on a bye week. Dave Montgomery came back, looked great, but he's on a bye week. So Kenyon Drake is somebody that if you need to fill in for a running back too, I think he's the guy.
Noted. He very well could do well. He proved last year when he was with the Cardinals that he's more than capable of taking that fantasy load on. So who knows? He could have a pretty solid game. That's fantasy. You just don't know, but it's definitely very viable there. So I can understand Kenyon being a big pickup if he's even on the wire. A lot of leagues he's already rostered. So if he's there, I would definitely choose Drake over a lot of the other options out there on the wire. That's for sure. All right. Any receivers you're targeting this week?
Yeah, we're going to finish this up with 4 receivers here. First, it's somebody we already mentioned, but Michael Gallup. He didn't come back last week, but he looks like he's probably going to be coming back this week. We know the Cowboys, they need to be more explosive. They can't have what happened at home against Denver to happen anymore. Michael Gallup, when he's in the lineup, he's an explosive piece of that offense. And they'll have 3 good receivers, and it'll be tough to know who's going to start week to week. But Michael Gallup, with Dak as his quarterback, needs to be picked up because he's been out since week 1, so he's available in a lot of leagues right now. Another guy that's actually surprisingly more available than you think is Brandon Iuke, who's wide receiver 68 on the year, but he had 18.7 in this last game. That makes 2 games in a row where he's been much more involved. His fantasy output's going up, and if that's going to be a continuous trend, especially they have Deebo Samuel. Defenses have to pay attention to him. George Kittle looked good in his return. Defenses have to pay attention to him. So as that offense has gotten healthier and the pieces are coming back and other guys are doing their jobs and taking attention away, I think Brandon Iuke week to week is probably going to be a pretty good flex option because we already mentioned the 49ers kind of stink, and they'll probably be playing from behind in a lot of games. So I think Brandon Iuke would be a good one to pick up if he's available in your league. Another one is going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones. He was wide receiver 63. This last game, he had 16.6, and most of that was a 60-yard catch for a touchdown. That's a big output for his fantasy value. But with OBJ gone, he slides in as that number 2 receiver. He's made plays earlier in the season. He obviously just made the explosive play in this last game against the Bengals. And you hope for more volume. I think there'll be days where there's more volume. Nick Chubb was on fire, so they just kept running the ball. Baker didn't have to do a lot in that game, but I think Donovan Peoples-Jones going forward is another guy that at least will have flex value pretty much week to week. And, kind of sleeper pick. I'm not real sure about this last guy, but but I have faith that Deshaun Jackson and the Raiders are the perfect marriage. Deshaun Jackson wanted to go somewhere where he could not only be able to win games, but where he would be a part of the offense. Now, he has to stay healthy, and that's a big part of it. Can he stay healthy for multiple games in a row? We haven't seen that a lot from him lately. So hoping he can stay on the field. But I think Deshaun Jackson with the Raiders is somebody that has a big chance to make a splash in fantasy football and for that team. Derek Carr has played really, really well this season. So between the great quarterback play and Deshaun Jackson still being one of the fastest people in the NFL, I think he's somebody that's going to be picked up in a lot of leagues this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely target Iuke if he's out there. The last 2 games, he has had a total of 15 targets. The previous, however many games he's played leading up to the last 2, he had a total of 16. So he's getting a hell of a lot more production than he has all season long. He has definitely proven himself over the last couple of weeks. He had 10 points 2 weeks ago, and last week he finished with almost 20 or over 20, depending on how your league is set up. He had 6 receptions, 89 yards, and a touchdown last week against the Cardinals. And the Cardinals defense is pretty legit. So I definitely like the IU pick up there if he is available on the wire. Gallup, same thing. Donovan Peoples-Jones now with OBJ gone. That should free him up with a little bit more volume opposite Jarvis Landry. And Deshaun Jackson, even though he's 100 years old at this point and he's constantly getting hurt, he is still a deep threat and more than capable of making a massive play. I think the Raiders are definitely going to try to get him involved. So look for the Carr Deshaun Jackson hookup early and often throughout this next game. So I don't have any disagreements with you there on your waiver wire pick. You want to quickly recap for everybody listening?
Yeah, so got a couple quarterbacks, Carson Wentz, who's a top 10 quarterback, Trey Lance as a speculative ad. The only running back this week is Kenyon Drake, if he's available in your league. And the wide receivers are Michael Gallup, Brandon Iuke, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Deshaun Jackson for the Raiders.
There you have it. Hefe's Week 10 waiver wire pickups. If you're in need of a guide, look for those guys. They'll definitely help you out this week. So let's transition over to his top 10 running backs for Week 10 in fantasy football. And, of course, we will always start with number 10.
Number 10 this week is going to be Devonta Freeman, going against the Dolphins here, who are 18th in the league against running backs. And with both the corners, Jones and Howard, being back for the Dolphins, I think that this run-first Ravens team is going to look to run the ball a lot and assert themselves. And Devonta Freeman, over the last couple, this last game, he had a receiving touchdown. It was only 2 catches, 4 yards, and a receiving touchdown. But still, it's been the last couple games he's gotten in the end zone. So if he's getting the opportunities in the red zone, he's somebody that I think has a lot of value in this particular game against the Dolphins, where I think they're going to want to establish the run early and often. Obviously, they're going to use their stable of running backs, but Devonta Freeman seems to be the lead guy right now with Latavius Murray not there. He seems to be getting the more high-value rushes when you're not named Lamar Jackson, that is. So Devonta Freeman, I think, can sneak up into the top 10 this week as the number 10 running back. Number 9 for me in week 10 is going to be Deandre Swift going up against Pittsburgh, which is a tough matchup. They don't allow a whole lot of rush yards, but they're more susceptible in the pass game. And look, I think that TJ Watt and Cam Hayward are going to be all over Jared Goff in this game. So I expect Deandre Swift and all the other running backs that they throw out there to see a lot of targets this week, because we're probably going to be down by 3 scores in the first half, if I had to guess. And so I think DeAndre Swift is basically going to play receiver in this game, and with his explosive ability, I think he has a chance to get like an 8 catch, over 100 yards receiving kind of day. Whether he gets in the end zone or not, I'm not sure, because this Lions offense probably won't be able to march down the field like that. But I think DeAndre Swift comes off a bye week and has a big week, comes out as number 9 this week. And number 8 for me is going to be Ezekiel Elliott going up against the Falcons, who are 27th in the league against running backs. And the way they just got beat against Denver, they're going to want to come back out and establish the run. They lost in the first game of the year. What'd they do after that? They leaned on Zeke, and Zeke produced. I expect that to be the case after a tough loss at home. They're back at home again here against the Falcons, and they're going to want to dominate. They're going to want to establish themselves early and often, and Zeke will eat, and I believe he will come in as the number 8 running back in Week 10.
Yeah, I particularly like the Devonte Freeman play here. I've noticed in a couple leagues that I'm in, he's also on the waiver wire. So definitely check your wire, see if he's available. If he is, pick him up. I like him a lot this week. The last 3 weeks, he had 16 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, and 11 fantasy points. Last game alone, he had 13 carries for 79 yards, 2 receptions, and as Jeffe said, a touchdown. He has had a touchdown in at least in his last 3 games. Yeah. So his usage, his volume has been consistent. He's been putting up the production and getting the points. So I definitely like the Devonta Freeman play there. Deandre Swift's always explosive. And Zeke, he was one of the best running backs. He's in there sometimes. He's not in there sometimes. When you get the good Zeke, you get the really good Zeke. When you don't get the good Zeke, well, he disappoints. But I think this week he will be good Zeke, and you will definitely get the value and production that you drafted him in the first round for. So I like Devonta Freeman, Deandre Swift, and your number 8, Ezekiel Elliott there. Let's move on to number 7.
All right, so number 7 is going to be Cordell Patterson. And look, he's the number 7 running back in fantasy football this year. And he was the 7th best back in Week 9. And I had him ranked as number 7 last week. Just brag on myself. I actually got one correct.
Nice.
And my favorite number is 7. So everything worked together. Just 7, 7, 7, 7. Cordell Patterson is going to be the 7th best back this week and stays as number 7 best back in all of fantasy this year. It is a tough matchup. I am a little worried about this one, but between him, we kind of talked about it last week with Cordell Patterson being a receiver. We saw that come into play in the last game where he was a lot more involved as a receiver. He kind of has been anyways, but, he's almost a 50-50 split in carries with Mike Davis and even more involved in the pass game. I don't see that changing at all, especially against a division opponent right now. The Falcons are the 7 seed in the NFC. They need to win. They're going to go to the guys that have gotten to where they are. So I think Cordell Patterson has another top 10 week coming in at 7. Coming in at number 6 for me this week is going to be Alvin Kamara going up against Tennessee, who's actually 8th in the league against running backs. But I think part of that is because their secondary's been so bad, teams game plan to pass against them. But Alvin Kamara was one of the 6 backs that got 20 or more points in Week 9, and he was able to do it with terrible quarterback play. Trevor Siemian did not get the job done, but Alvin Kamara did what he does. When it comes to fantasy, New Orleans didn't win. It was an ugly game for him, but Alvin Kamara produced, and I think he's going to have more than enough opportunity to produce against Tennessee, especially, the two people in the league, the 2 rushers in the league over the last, I can't remember how many games, over the last 4 games or something like that, that have gotten more pressures than anybody in the league are Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry for the Titans. So if they're able to get pressure on whoever New Orleans throws out there at quarterback, I think that's going to just enforce the idea that Alvin Kamara is going to see even more targets. So Alvin Kamara should have a big week, and he's coming in at number 6 for me.
Yeah, I can't argue with either one of those guys. Alvin Kamara is one of the best in the business. So, of course, he's going to be up there almost every single week, especially not having a solid starting quarterback. They're going to rely on him heavily. And Cordell Patterson, he's been up there. Like you said, he's a top 10 back. He's proven that all season long. So, no reason he shouldn't be up there as well. So, with that said, we'll move on to number 5. And a guy who I told you would be on the starting list last week, and I hit this one big time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as it was happening, was like, okay, he was definitely right about this one. I thought Chase Edmonds would have a better week than James Conner. Now, Chase Edmonds did leave that game, but that's why I have James Conner at number 5, because Chase Edmonds has a high ankle sprain. He'll be out for multiple weeks. James Conner has been finding the end zone all week and did that 3 times in this last game. And we've talked about before, he just looks so good. Like especially over the last few weeks, he's definitely catapulted himself into the top echelon of running backs in the league. He's looked phenomenal, whether it's rushing the ball or through the passing game. And with Chase Edmonds out, he should see even more passing game value, and the Cardinals do a lot of that, short pass stuff, which is an extension of the run game. So I think James Conner is going to be a top 5 guy most of these weeks, even against Carolina, who is a really, really good defense. They're 4th in terms of fantasy against running backs. So it's a tough matchup, but I think the volume's about to be crazy for James Conner, and I think he's going to come through with a big game for people that took chance on him and drafted him this year. So James Conner, my number 5 running back this week. Number 4 is going to be CMC, who, I was pretty proud of myself. I wasn't sure if he was actually going to be limited because we hadn't seen him do that before. But he was somewhat limited, and he still had a good outing. He got over 14 points, but only played 47% of the snaps. And if he plays more, assuming he's going to play more, he's got a game under his belt, he's going to practice more, assuming they give him a little more workload, then if he gets touches, he gets points. Like it's Christian McCaffrey. He didn't even play half the snaps in that game, got you 14 points. So if he doubles that or almost doubles that, in terms of snap count, then he's somebody that could easily see 25 points this week, even against Arizona, who is 6th in the league against running backs. So tough matchup, but it's CMC. If he's coming back and he's going to stay healthy, I like him as a top 5 option. Number 3 here is going to be Naji Harris, who gets an amazing matchup against Detroit, who is 31st against running backs. And, Najee should have a huge day against the worst team in the league. Like, this is a no-brainer top 5 this week. I thought about putting him at number 1 because it's the freaking Lions. But Pittsburgh doesn't have the greatest offense and offensive line, right? So, didn't want to put him above the guys that I have above him. But I think Najee is going to have a massive day and come in at number 3.
Yeah, he's really proven himself in his rookie campaign. He's averaging 20 fantasy points per game and has scored at least 1 touchdown in 5 straight games. Like you, I don't expect that to change against a weak-ass Detroit Lions run defense this week. So I think he will have another huge performance. I actually have him on my must starts, which we're going to get to later. But he's one of the guys on there. Typically, Najee Harris, you have him, you're going to be playing him every single week. But because that matchup is so good against the Detroit Lions, that's why I have him on my list, even though you're obviously going to be starting him because he should have just a monster game. CMC, he's going to get his touches. He's going to get his points in the run game and in the passing game. So I like that play there. And of course, James Conner, man, I told you last week, he's having a hell of a season. There's just something about him in that Cardinals offense, man. I don't understand how the Steelers couldn't get him to play the way that he is playing this season. Like everything just clicked for him, and he's running the ball. He has a passing work going for him here and there. With Chase Edmonds out now, he's going to get more volume there too. So just something about him in that Cardinals offense that's working out really well for him.
Yes, it is. And playing on the best team or one of the best teams in the NFL probably feels pretty good week in and week out.
Oh, I'm sure. All right. So that's his 10 through 3. And we will move on to number 2, which I'm kind of surprised you have him at number 2.
Yeah, I was too. I wanted to put him at 1, but I wanted to take my bias away from it because I think number 1 is going to have a monster week. But
I agree. Yeah,
I think Jonathan Taylor going against Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 13th in terms of fantasy against running backs, and it doesn't even matter. Like, we've seen Jonathan Taylor over the last 6 games. He is going crazy right now and asserting himself now. Even after all these big games he's had, and with Derrick Henry not even playing last week, he's still 7 fantasy points behind Derrick Henry. But
that's because it's Derrick Henry, man. Like, the dude's an absolute freak.
Yeah, freak of nature. But of the active running backs right now, JT's at the top. And if you think about it, the last time that the Colts and the Jaguars played was week 17 of the 2020 season, and Jonathan Taylor had 250 rush yards. That wasn't altogether yards. He ran for 250 on the ground against the Jaguars. And I think this year's Jaguars defense is worse than last year's Jaguars defense. And the Colts offensive line is not only healthy, but they're so healthy that they have 6 offensive linemen that they use instead of the normal 5. So they've been mauling people lately, and I expect the Colts to do what they've done against other bad teams, which is absolutely abuse them on the ground. JT is going to be the benefactor of that, and he's going to have a huge week. But he's going to come in at number 2 because number 1 is going to have a James Conner week 9 type week.
If not more.
If not more. Dalvin Cook going up against the Chargers, who we've talked about pretty much every week. Whoever plays the Chargers is on this list pretty much every week. And because they're so bad at stopping runners. And Dalvin Cook is coming off of a 100-yard game and, modest score because he didn't get in the end zone. We talked about on the Pro Football Talk podcast that I think Dalvin Cook is going to be like their game manager here. They're going to give him, probably pretty close to 30 carries. They're going to want to control this game on the ground because the Chargers can't stop it. And then the Chargers secondary is pretty good. I know Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins, they've been balling out this year. But I think this is going to be the game that we've been waiting for from Dalvin Cook all year, where he just fucking explodes on somebody. Feels like the Chargers of that team, they're kind of in a tailspin and like they've lost their identity over these last few weeks. We don't know what's happening. And so I think Dalvin Cook, like we mentioned, could have a 40-point outburst, maybe even 45 plus.
Yeah, typically I don't have Dalvin Cook on my start list because he's Dalvin Cook. He's going to be starting. But this week, because of this matchup with the Chargers, I have him as my number 1 must start of the week. This Chargers defense, man, like you said, they are probably the worst run defense in the league. They are giving up a league-leading 161 yards a game on the ground. That is 25 more yards on average than the next closest team. So you add in Cook's passing game work, and he's bound to have a fucking monster day this week in fantasy. It's going to be crazy to watch.
Yep, and that's what I expect. I expect him to have at least 1 touchdown on the ground, at least 1 touchdown through the passing game. So, just a huge week. I'm excited to watch because I really do think this is going to be Dalvin Cook's go-off week.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you want to recap your top 10 running backs real quick?
Yep. So number 10 is Devonte Freeman against Miami. Number 9 is Deandre Swift against the Steelers. Number 8 is Ezekiel Elliott against the Falcons. Cordell Patterson is up against the Cowboys at number 7. Number 6 is Alvin Kamara against Tennessee. Number 5 is James Conner against Carolina. Number 4 is CMC against the Cardinals. Number 3 is Naji Harris against the Lions. Number 2 is Jonathan Taylor against the Jaguars. And number 1 is Dalvin Cook going up against the Chargers.
There you have it. Hefe's Week 10, top 10 running backs for fantasy football. Let's move on to your top 10 wide receivers on the week. We'll start with number 10. Go.
All right, number 10, a guy we talked about over the last couple of weeks, is going to be Hunter Renfro going up against Kansas City. Yes, sir. Kansas City's actually 8th against wide receivers. I don't know how that's a thing. They've been getting punished through the air. But look, Bryan Edwards had 4 targets in this last game, without Henry Ruggs there. First game without Henry Ruggs in the lineup. Bryan Edwards gets 4 targets, has 0 fantasy points. But Renfro had 17.9, and he's going to continue to see a nice bit of targets. And, with Deshaun Jackson coming in, how does that hurt his value? Does it take, a decent amount of targets away? Probably not, but it'll stretch the field and make teams not just focus on Hunter Renfro. So I think he's going to continue to be a viable option week in, week out. He's going to see a lot of targets. I already mentioned Derek Carr has been playing really, really good. This last game against the Giants, they didn't play well. They didn't execute in the red zone. I think that'll change over time as they get used to life without Henry Ruggs in that lineup. But Hunter Renfro is going to be a big part of the season. Him and Waller, I think, are going to be the favorite targets for Derek Carr going forward. And he comes in at number 10 for me this week. Number 9 is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. And he climbed from the number 11 wide receiver in fantasy. Last week, he's now the number 7 wide receiver in fantasy. And the reason I have him at 9 and not higher is because I think we're going to lean on Jonathan Taylor. And T.Y. Hilton's supposed to come back, so it'll take a couple targets away. So I think it'll be more of a modest day, but he sees enough targets through the game and finds the end zone in a lot of games lately. So I think going up against Jacksonville, who have a poor secondary, he'll be able to take advantage of it at some point and still put out a nice fantasy value kind of day. Comes in at number 9 for me this week. Number 8 is going to be Rashad Bateman going up against Miami. And I think in this game, Marquis Brown, in my opinion, is going to get locked up from either side. He switches sides every now and then, but Howard or Jones, I think they can both lock up Brown here. They have the size advantage on him. I know, Byron might have a little trouble keeping up with him, but Howard's pretty fast. I think he can stay with him. And I just think this is going to be the Rashad Bateman breakout game, and that's what I'm watching for here. I think he's going to have a big outing. Miami, outside of those 2 studs on the outside, they don't have a very good defense, and I think Bateman's going to be the guy in this game that's able to take advantage of that from where he plays in their offense. So it's kind of more of a wide receiver cornerback matchup thing for me here. I think Rashad Bateman and Devonta Freeman are going to be the game plan for the Ravens in this game. Rashad Bateman comes in as my number 8 wide receiver this week.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I am going to go on the opposite side of you here, and I have Marquise Brown on my must-start wide receivers. He's Hollywood Brown. He's been living it up this entire season long. This is his breakout year, and the Dolphins' defense is giving up 280 yards a game through the air. So I think Brown should be able to put up some big numbers in what should be a blowout for the Ravens. However, if they do lock him up, Rashad Bateman will be the guy, the go-to guy for Lamar Jackson. So either one of us is going to be right, or hell, both of us could be right on that. You never know. But with Devontae Freeman, we are in agreement there that Devontae Freeman's going to have a pretty good game. I would say one or the other. If you got him, the ceiling's too high for you not to start one of these guys this coming week. And then Hunter Renfro, I've been high on him the last few weeks. He's been in and out of my must start. And with Henry Ruggs not on the team anymore, Hunter Renfro is the go-to guy, hands down. He has been the number 1 receiver in Las Vegas all season long, but now his volume just increased. And Michael Pittman Jr. has shown who he really is this season. We've talked about him what seems like every single week, so no doubt he is definitely well deserving of being in your top 10 for week 10. So there you got number 10, Hunter Renfro, number 9, Michael Pittman Jr., number 8, Rashad Bateman, and let's move on to number 7.
All right, number 7. I'm excited to finally have him back in the top 10 is Keenan Allen. And his target share, even when he wasn't putting up a bunch of points, he was seeing a lot of targets. But I think what's happened is that at the start of the season, teams wanted to take away Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams was abusing teams, and it was working really well for this offense. And ever since the Chargers started struggling, we've seen Mike Williams being the game plan for the defense and being taken away. Keenan Allen still seeing a bunch of targets, and when he's able to get into the end zone, it pumps up his numbers so much because he's already getting a bunch of targets, which racks up the yards. So with his target share and the fact that Williams is getting covered up by defenses and takes some attention away from where Keenan Allen is, I think it's a great situation for Allen to come back and be the Keenan Allen we were expecting him to be. And I think he's going to do that against Minnesota, who's 27th in the league against wide receivers. I think this is going to be a fairly high-scoring affair, and Keenan Allen's going to benefit from that, maybe even be the highest scoring wide receiver from this game this week, and he comes in at number 7 for me. Number 6 is going to be Chris Godwin. I felt like I just had to pick one of the Bucs receivers. And, because they're going up against Washington, who has a horrible secondary this year. Whatever they did in the offseason, it's not working out. They're 31st in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And the pass rush for Washington isn't really there either, and the Bucs have a good offensive line. So I think that Tom Brady's going to have time to sit in the pocket. And what's he going to do? He's going to dissect the defense, hit somebody downfield. And I thought about putting Antonio Brown here, but then I heard he was still in a walking boot. And the last 2 times I had him in the top 10, he didn't even play. So Chris Godwin, I think, is going to be the guy that makes the big plays and has a big fantasy output, 6 or 7 catches, 120 to 150 yards, depending on how big those plays are. I think he has a good chance to have a really big week here. So he's a must start for me coming in at number 6.
Yeah, so Antonio Brown, like you said, he's questionable. I also heard the rumor that he is still walking around with a boot on. However, if he is good to go, you have either Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Is Mike Evans hurt?
No, I believe Mike Evans is good. I haven't heard anything about Mike
So
Evans.
you good to go? Yeah, me either. So I was just curious. Yeah, so you either have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, or Antonio Brown. If you have any one of those 3 on your roster, they need to be starting this week against the Washington secondary that is leading the league in passing yards given up per game, and they are second in total touchdowns scored through the air with 20 on the season. So I think Brady and the boys are about to have a field day. I like any one of those 3 if you got them on the roster to play them. So I can absolutely agree with you there on having at least Chris Godwin in your top 10. You can substitute Antonio Brown's or even Mike Evans there if you want. And Keenan Allen's Keenan Allen. He gets his volume, he gets his points. And like you said, he gets in the end zone. He's putting up a 20, 30-point game. So I like it there. I think he will do that. He should have a pretty good game in what appears to be going to be a high-scoring game against the Minnesota Vikings. So, all right, let's move on to your number 5.
All right, my number 5 is somebody that's been, fairly disappointing so far this year compared to what we expected. It's going to be Stefan Diggs, but they're playing the Jets, and the Jets are actually 7th against wide receivers. They've had a decent secondary, but the Jets lost Marcus May, their safety. Their over-the-top guy, the guy that he's the heart and soul of that defense. They lose him. I think that's going to be a huge problem for the Jets. Because the offense has struggled for most of the season, and kind of the bright spot has been the Jets defense, a game here and a game there. And again, I just think Marcus May not being there is going to open up holes in the secondary, and Stefan Diggs is going to be the beneficiary of that. And this is a team that the Bills know well. They play them twice a year, and the Bills are going to come in ready to put a bunch of points up after not being able to score a touchdown at all against the Jags. And so I just think Stefan Diggs, all the ingredients are there for him to have like a 25-point week. So he comes in at number 5 for me. Number 4 this week is going to be Cooper Kupp going up against San Francisco, who's at 11th in the league against wide receivers. And I just think with the injuries to their secondary, they can be exploited. The Rams are also going to be pissed off this week. It was a bad loss at home to a wounded Tennessee team. And so, with the bad taste in their mouth coming off a loss, what happened the last time they lost? Cooper Kupp came out and had like a 34-point game or something like that. I think they're going to force the ball to their playmakers in this game. Cooper Kupp should have a big game against the division opponent, so he's going to be my number 4 receiver this week. Number 3 is actually going to be Terry McLaurin going up against Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay, we know all the injuries to their secondary, the woes that they've had there. And so I think Terry McLaurin is going to be able to abuse that a little bit, because they're supposed to be getting Washington is supposed to be getting Curtis Samuel back. And while I don't expect Curtis Samuel to be a game changer for Washington, you have to know where he is on the field. He's very fast. He can slip into holes. So the defense actually is going to have to pay attention to somebody that isn't named Terry McLaurin. Logan Thomas also coming back for Washington. So I feel like, with the team getting healthy after a bye week, they'll be able to get McLaurin heavily involved in this game. They're probably going to be down for most of this game, in my opinion, and that's going to force even more targets to McLaurin as they try to make up ground. So Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, going to have a good week coming in at number 3 for me.
Yeah, the Bucs secondary is just complete garbage. Almost every single big-time receiver puts up hell points on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I could see Terry McLaurin being up there as your number 3. Cooper Kupp, number 4. Again, he has been one of the most consistent and big-time wide receivers, and they had a pretty rough game last week against the Tennessee Titans, so look for the Rams to be putting up hella points this week against the San Francisco 49ers, who are a divisional foe, so they definitely want to make a point there. And Stefan Diggs, he hasn't been a star like he has been or like he was last season. I think he was either number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in the league when it comes to fantasy, depending on how your league is structured. But Stefan Diggs this week, absolute must play. He's going to have a huge game. The last week, the Bills had a pretty rough game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think that's going to happen 2 games in a row. Diggs being one of the best receivers in the league with Josh Allen throwing him the ball should have a monster game against the New York Jets because the Jets secondary is ranked 28th in passing defense. And like you said, they're going to be without Marcus May. So Stefan Diggs should have a monster bounce back game along with Josh Allen this week. So I like to play there. All right, number 2 on your list.
Number 2 is going to be A.J. Brown going up against the Saints here, who are actually, for as good as that defense is, they're 29th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers. And with Derrick Henry out, we kind of saw what the game plan is. They're going to use a committee backfield to take up all those carries. They're still going to try to establish the run because they have a really good offensive line. But A.J. Brown is going to see even more targets. As the year goes on, I think he's just going to see more and more targets. They're going to have to force feed him the ball, and he's very good, and he's very physical. He can win his one-on-ones in coverage at a very consistent basis because he can just body pretty much any corner in the league and most linebackers. So A.J. Brown, I think, has a big opportunity and probably will abuse Marshawn Lattimore this year, who's been inconsistent. He has some really, really good games, some games where he's very leaky in coverage. So I think it's going to be one of those games for Lattimore. A.J. Brown is going to body him time after time after time, and Tannehill is going to force feed his racing horse, and he's going to come up big, probably 30-plus points this week for A.J. Brown. Coming in at number 2 for me. Coming in at number 1 is going to be Devonte Adams, not only because Devonte Adams is just that damn good, but also because he's getting his MVP quarterback back. Not only is he getting his MVP quarterback back, but this is the Aaron Rodgers revenge game to get everybody to just shut the up about what he's doing with his life and remind everybody that he is the best to do it in the NFL. He's going to come out and make a statement against the Seattle defense that is not very good. Devonte Adams is going to be the main beneficiary of that, and I see him having probably 15 targets in this game, 10, 11, 12 catches for like 180 yards, 2, maybe 3 touchdowns. Like, you feed the king. Like, you get the MVP back, you feed the king out there. So Devonte Adams, I think, is going to have a massive week and comes in at number 1 for me.
Yeah, man. Like you said, Aaron Rodgers is back after sitting out last week with COVID, with the media onslaught that he has faced about his COVID vaccination status over this last week and a half or so. He's going to be absolutely pissed. And when Aaron Rodgers is pissed, he turns into the league MVP. Just look at last season. So that's great news for arguably the league's best wide receiver in Devonte Adams. And Aaron Rodgers, Devonte Adams, throw in this weak-ass Seattle secondary. This could be a 40-point fantasy banger for both Adams and Aaron Rodgers this week.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. And, I don't know who did this. I was going through just a little while before we started this, some of the random leagues that I'm in and going through and who's on the waivers. Aaron Rodgers was available in one of those leagues.
What?
Can you imagine dropping Aaron for nothing?
Who are you playing 10-year-olds?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know if like people that aren't.
They're like, who's that guy? He's old. I don't know him.
They're like, oh, he's not vaccinated. I don't want him on my fantasy football team.
Jeez, I hope you snagged him up.
Yeah, he's on the waiver priority right now for sure.
Hell yeah! All right, real quick, you want to recap your top 10?
So the top 10 for wide receivers this week is going to be Hunter Renfro coming in at number 10 against Kansas City. Number 9 is Michael Pittman Jr. against the Jags. Number 8, Rashad Bateman against the Dolphins. Number 7 is Keenan Allen against Minnesota here. Number 6 is Chris Godwin against Washington football team. And like Zach mentioned, you could throw any of the Bucs receivers in here. Any of them could have a wonderful day. Number 5 here to start the top 5 is Stefan Diggs against the Jets in a get-right game for the Bills. Number 4 is Cooper Kupp. Number 3, Terry McLaurin. Number 2, A.J. Brown having a big day against the Saints. And number 1 is Devontae Adams against Seattle.
There it is. Have faced top 10, week 10 wide receivers for fantasy football. We've already talked about a lot of who's on my surefire stardom situms list this week, but we'll go over the guys who we didn't mention yet. Starting with the running backs in the must start for week 10 football. We've already talked about Dalvin Cook and Naji Harris. I also want to add in Austin Eckler for the Los Angeles Chargers against the Minnesota Vikings. Just like Dalvin Cook, I think Austin Eckler this game should have a pretty decent performance. The Minnesota Vikings are the next closest team in rushing yards given up per game. Remember when I mentioned the Chargers being dead last? Well, Minnesota is right there next to them. They've only given up 7 rushing touchdowns on the year, but with Eckler's upside in the passing game, I definitely think he is a strong play and should have a good game against the Minnesota Vikings this week. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought about the same thing, and it was hard not to put him inside the top 10. But, there's always that one star that doesn't quite get up there. Austin Eckler, he's going to put up double-digit points. Does he get in the end zone a couple times? That's what's going to propel him into a top 10 back. And I guess his receiving value kind of puts him up there too, right? So, you're definitely starting him pretty much no matter who you're playing. He's just too damn good. He's a really good runner. Everybody talks about him in the pass game, especially in our circles, fantasy football, it's very relevant that he's good in the pass game. But he's a very good runner too, and they've been able to establish the run in some games. So he's somebody that I feel comfortable with in my lineup every single week. There's not really a matchup that would ever make me nervous with him.
Absolutely. All right. Another guy I have here is actually the only other starting running back I have on my list is Daryl Henderson for the Los Angeles Rams against the San Francisco 49ers. After his worst fantasy performance of the year last week against the Tennessee Titans, let's be honest, the Rams offense as a whole completely struggled. So I expect Daryl Henderson to bounce back with a strong game against this divisional foe, San Francisco 49ers. The Niners have given up 12 rushing touchdowns to opponents this season, which is the 3rd most in the league. What do you think?
I like that. I like that matchup a lot, and I didn't know that they've given up so many rushing touchdowns, and I think it's going to be they're going to want to establish their dominance. We kind of talked about it with Cooper Kupp. This is a get right game for them against a divisional opponent. It's a big time game. They have to keep up with the Cardinals in that division, and they're going to do everything they have to do that. And I think putting the ball in your stars' hands is the way you win games in the NFL. Daryl Henderson is one of those stars. He had shown it for weeks going up to last week. And so you just give him the touches, whether it's, through the air or on the ground, it doesn't matter. Like, their offensive line is good. They have to be able to open the lanes. They didn't have a good day against the Titans. They have to be better, and I think they will be better. I like the Daryl Henderson play a lot, especially against the Niners, which is a very favorable matchup.
Absolutely. I'm going to flip over to the wide receivers, your must-start wide receivers. We've already talked about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown against the Washington football team, Marquis Brown, Rashad Bateman for the Baltimore Ravens against the Miami Dolphins, Stefan Diggs for the Buffalo Bills against the New York Jets, Devonte Adams for the Green Bay Packers against the Seattle Seahawks. I got one more guy I want to throw in here. Let me know what you think about it. That is Jalen Waddle for the Miami Dolphins against the Baltimore Ravens. Waddle is Miami's wide receiver number 1, and with the exception of tight end Mike Gesicki, Jalen is about the only other offensive weapons the Dolphins have. This week, they're going to take on a Ravens secondary that gives up about 282 yards a game. So I like Waddle's chances for a solid fantasy day.
Yeah, I would put some thought into Waddle and Gesicki because I have Gesicki on a couple of my fantasy lineups, and it makes me nervous for both of them, honestly, because, Mike Gesicki is the tight end that went to wide receiver this year. Does he have the wide receiver experience to be able to deal with the corners that Baltimore has on the other side? Jalen Waddle, he's a rookie. He's a really good football player, really good receiver, but he's probably going to be shadowed by Marlon Humphrey for most of this game if I had to assume how they're going to try to match this up. And Marlon Humphrey is one of the best corners in the NFL, no matter how bad what's going on around the rest of that secondary is. Marlon Humphrey has continued to be one of the best corners, so I'm a little worried about both of those guys. Again, it kind of depends who matches up where. Do they want Humphrey because he's bigger to be on Gesicki? I don't know how they'll do that. Waddle, I thought Waddle was going to have a big week this last week. He did decent, not quite what I expected. And, the Baltimore defense isn't as good as it normally is. Obviously, a lot of injuries play into that. So I feel like in the matchup against Baltimore, you need to play him, but you definitely feel nervous about it.
Yeah, well, another argument can be made is that Miami's run game, which I'm getting ready to get into with Myles Gaskin, is just completely awful. So they have really no option other than Gesicki and Waddle to get the ball to. So that leads me to transition into my Siddums list, and I'm going to start with the running backs. We'll keep it in the same game, and we'll talk about Myles Gaskin for the Dolphins going against the Ravens. Check this out. He had an all right performance last week in fantasy. I think he had like 17 points, but that's purely because he had like 4 receptions and he was able to get into the end zone. But check this out. This is his rushing stat line from last week against the Texans, who were 31st in rushing yards given up on the season. 20 carries, 34 yards. That's 1.7 yards per carry. Absolutely insane. So if you can't rush on one of the league's worst defenses in the league, there's no way you're going to be able to put up any kind of significant fantasy value on a team like the Baltimore Ravens that just so happen to be one of the best run defense teams in the league. Yeah, he can get some passing work, put up points like he did last week, 4 receptions and a touchdown. Oh, mediocre game, whatever. But he is not going to do shit on the ground. No Dolphins running back's going to do shit on the ground against the Ravens, especially Myles Gaskin. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a wild stat. 20 for 34, against the Texans. So what that tells me is I knew the Dolphins were the most pass happy. They pass more than anybody in the league. The Dolphins do. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback. They pass more than anybody. I believe Jacoby Brissett threw the ball 43 times this last week. Like, they throw a lot. And it makes a lot of sense now. I thought, maybe it was just bad coaching, like they're not game planning right and they're passing too much, and were getting down in games, so they couldn't run. But even when they have the chance to run the ball, they can't run the ball, and that kind of blows my mind. Their offensive line is that damn bad. That's what that tells me.
Yeah.
Those guys up front can't get the job done, whether they're passing the ball because they can't protect their quarterbacks or whether they're running the ball. So I've been nervous about Myles Gaskin every week because you never know how many snaps is he even going to play in this game, and how good is he going to be able to be? Obviously, there's really no rushing upside. So I guess if you're stuck playing him, you're hoping he gets a couple catches and falls into the end zone and maybe get you 10 points. But I don't like it.
No, go pick up like AJ Dillon or somebody who's backing up a fucking superstar who's still going to get some points put up, because Myles Gaskin's just not going to do his shit for you.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So, all right, we'll move on to the next guy I got on my list. That would be Michael Carter for the New York Jets against the Buffalo Bills. This Bills defense is stingy. Yeah, let's talk about last game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but the Jags won 9-6. They didn't even score a touchdown on the Buffalo Bills. So their defense wasn't the problem in that game. It was the offense. The Bills are ranked 4th in the run defense, 1st in passing defense. Unless you have a high-octane offense with multiple weapons, I am staying away from offenses facing the Buffalo Bills. The Jets are not a high-octane offense by any stretch of the imagination. So, to me, Michael Carter, absolute no-go this week. Or Ty Johnson.
That's how I feel, too. The only hope for either of those guys in this game against the Bills is, passing game work. But if Mike White's playing, which he's supposed to, his first game as a starter, he didn't throw a single pass more than 15 yards down the field. So what's the game plan going to be? They probably coached for that. And this defense, like Zach's talking about, it's insane. Whether it's rushing or passing, like I'm very nervous about anybody that plays Buffalo week in and week out because they shut down everybody. They're so sound on defense. And so yeah, if I do have Michael Carter on one of my rosters, I have Tyler Johnson on one of my rosters, and I'm going to get waiver wire guys to play because I'm not planning on touching either of them.
Nah, the Bills D is just way too good this week. So yeah, definitely sit him with this matchup. Another guy I have on my must sit weeks for running back is, and you'll probably argue with this because every time I have him on here, you argue with me on it, but that's Antonio Gibson for the Washington football team against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last week, Gibson had the second most carries behind backup Jarrett Patterson. That's a concern to me, especially facing a tough Bucs run defense that ranks second on my list, who has been ranked first for like almost the entire season. They just now moved into second. So Gibson might have that passing value, but with how poor the Washington offense has been, I'm personally looking for a better option this week.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I'm very nervous about Antonio Gibson going forward. He has a stress fracture in his shin. He's had the other, I think, an ankle injury also. He's banged up right now, and I've heard Washington fans talk about Patterson. Apparently, he's good. The team likes him. And then they have J.D. McKissick, who gets a lot of, especially the last couple games, he's been getting a lot of targets in the passing game. So with whatever Antonio Gibson is dealing with, I think it's hurting him, which is hurting the team. So I think they're going to continue to limit his reps, let the other guys continue to share snaps. So going forward, like I said, I'm very nervous about Antonio Gibson. And, if I had to pick a back out of that backfield for the rest of the season at all, it would be McKissick.
Yeah, and at this point, I mean, your team's pretty much not going to make the playoffs. Let's be honest. So, if he's that banged up, why are you not shutting him down for the season?
That's how I feel too. Like you hear stress fracture in the shin. Like, do you want somebody to go for his legs on a play and snap his leg in half? Like, yeah, that would be terrible. So like he's your star running back for the future. Like your team sucks this year. Your defense is going to lose you every game. Like sit your star, let him get healthy through the offseason, come back next year revitalized and be good. But they're playing with fire right now. They really are.
Yeah. All right, I got a tandem here on my list, and that is Adrian Peterson and Jeremy McNichols for the Tennessee Titans against the New Orleans Saints. Now that Derrick Henry is on the sidelines, the Titans are spreading the run volume around between Adrian Peterson, Jeremy McNichols, and Deontae Foreman, throwing the fact that they're taking on the newly crowned #1 run defense in the entire league this week. Stay far and clear from the Tennessee Titans backfield.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. There's no confidence if they're going to use 3 running backs. Like, which one do I want more? Adrian Peterson. Why? Because even at 36 years old, he can still get it done at the goal line. So, that's the only reason I would go for any of them. Because again, 3 running backs splitting Derrick Henry's 30 carries a game. I don't like any of the production any of those guys can give me. We've seen Devonta Freeman before try to be a starter. It didn't work out. There's a reason he's the 3rd string. Jeremy McNichols never gets carries for a reason. So not confident about any of those guys, but if I had to play one, like if I was in desperate need of a running back, it would be Adrian Peterson.
Speaking of 3 running backs, the last group of guys I have here on my must-sits for Week 10 for running backs is Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, and Brandon Bolden for the New England Patriots against the Cleveland Browns. Look, I like the way the Patriots have improved their run game, and these 3 backs have been putting in the work to get it done. Damian Harris had 15 carries last game. Ramondre Stevenson had 10, and Brandon Bolden had 8, and all 3 were pretty equal in terms of the pass work as well. So it's a good thing for the Patriots offense, but when it comes to fantasy, because this volume is split as evenly as it is among the 3, and the Browns are a top 10 defense in both the run and passing game, I'm staying away from all three of these guys this week.
Yeah, I think I would too. I was thinking about the same thing yesterday, and I think Cleveland without Odell Beckham Jr. on it is just a different animal. And their defense over the last few weeks has been really, really solid. And I mean, if you think about that defensive front, the whole front seven for Cleveland, I think they're going to be able to stop the run in every facet, whatever the Patriots try to do. I think there's not going to be much room to go for Patriots running backs before contact in this game. And, the opportunities are going to be far and few between. I think they're actually going to be playing from behind for most of this game. And so I don't see them even being able to get, 25, 30 carries off in this game. Maybe because they've been so run heavy lately, they get 25. But I think this is going to be more of a making Mac Jones put it on his shoulders to beat us kind of a game. So Patriot, like you said, and week to week, I mean, we just don't know who's going to do week to week. I remember a couple weeks ago, I had Ramondre Stevenson had a good game, so I put him on the waiver wire. He didn't even play the next game, but Brandon Bolden was the receiver back that balled out, and then he didn't play the next game after I had him on the waiver wire. And then now we got all these running backs pitching in. Like, you just week to week don't know who's going to do it for the Patriots. So I'm nervous about all of them.
Yeah, understandable. All right, we'll keep it with the sit-ems, but we're going to move over to the wide receiver side here. I only have 3 on my list. I have more, which I'll talk about at the end. I'll kind of explain that. But the 3 guys I for sure have on my list this week, I'll start with Elijah Moore for the New York Jets against the Buffalo Bills. Elijah Moore had a career day last week against the Indianapolis Colts. He had 7 receptions on 8 targets, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 27 fantasy points. Unfortunately, this week he's taking on the league's best secondary in the Buffalo Bills, who have only given up 5 passing touchdowns on the year. That's 5 less than the next closest team. Absolutely insane. I don't like the Jets offense against this Bills defense, so I'm sitting Elijah Moore this week. What do you think?
Yep, me too. I have Elijah Moore on a couple of rosters, and there's no way I'm playing him. We kind of talked about it. When it comes to the Bills, I don't feel good about anybody. Like, you'd have to be like Devonte Adams for me to want you in my lineup when the Bills are who you're playing. So, yeah, Elijah Moore, Jameson Crowder, Corey Davis, if he comes back, it doesn't matter. Don't start any of them.
Another guy that I actually like a lot, but I'm really struggling with this one, and that's DJ Moore for the Carolina Panthers against the Arizona Cardinals. Just the way Sam Darnold has been playing lately, it's not doing DJ Moore any favors. Last week, he came out with only 3 receptions for 32 yards on 7 targets. This week, they're taking on the Cardinals, who rank in the top 7 in terms of passing defense. If your name isn't Christian McCaffrey, it may be a while before I'm considering starting a Carolina Panthers fantasy player this year, especially this week against the Arizona Cardinals. What do you think?
Yeah, it's tough. On the team that I care about, I have DJ Moore, and I was hoping with McCaffrey back in the lineup, it would open things up and DJ would be able to have a good game, and it just didn't happen. Now, McCaffrey didn't even play 50% of the snaps. If that goes up, maybe it changes things a little bit, but Darnold's been terrible. He's the worst, in my opinion, worst starting quarterback in the NFL. It just has not looked pretty. I don't know how, I know they didn't play tough opponents the first 3 games, but I mean, he actually looked good the first 3 games, and since then, it's been awful. So I think the best case scenario is that Darnold does not clear concussion protocol and that some other quarterback plays, because Darnold's just not getting it done. He's missing. He doesn't throw the ball to the correct spots. There were a couple plays that I saw highlighted by a former defensive back on Twitter last night, and talking about he's got to throw the ball to this spot instead of this spot because the defender is playing it like this, and he just doesn't know that stuff, or he can't get the ball. He's not accurate enough to get the ball there. So, I'm playing him in my lineup because my season's basically screwed anyways. But I feel like with McCaffrey in, eventually it's going to open it back up. The quarterback play is worrisome, but I think better days are ahead for DJ Moore. Maybe not this week. I'm still very nervous. Again, the matchup, not great. The quarterback play, not great. So I'm starting him, but if you're listening, if you have even a decent flex option, I would probably stay away from it.
All right. Another player that I really like, but given the offensive struggles of his team, plus a tough top 10 matchup, I'm avoiding, once again, Devonte Smith this week against the Denver Broncos. Last week, he hauled in 5 receptions on 6 targets for 116 yards and a touchdown. I had him on my sit list last week, and he proved me wrong. I will admit that. But let's be honest, it's been a roller coaster season for the rookie, and Denver just completely shut down the Cowboys' high-flying passing game just last week. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence with the Eagles taking on the Broncos. So I'm looking for a better play instead of Devontae this week. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any game plan against Denver, it's going to be to run the ball, which the Eagles have done a lot more of recently. So I think they're going to try not to pass a whole lot. I think it was like midway through the third quarter or most of the way through the third quarter of this last game, Jalen Hurts had 9 passes. So I think they're going to continue to try to run the ball and keep the game out of Jalen Hurts' hands, which is going to hurt the fantasy value of guys like Devontae Smith, especially against a secondary that is so good. The personnel that the Broncos have is just so fire. Patrick Surtain is questionable. Does that matter? I don't think so. I do have a couple shares of Devontae Smith, and I have already benched him this week. I have no intention of putting him in. I would rather go find somebody on the waiver wire because the Broncos secondary is one of the scariest in the NFL.
Absolutely. So I have a couple groups here that I was strongly considering putting on my list because all these teams that they are playing are top 5 pass defenses. But you'll start these guys because they're wide receiver number ones or wide receiver 1B for their teams. Their offenses are more than capable of producing against any defense out there. But I'm going to be careful with the wide receivers 2s and 3s with these teams because of the matchups. And that's the Cardinals wide receivers against the Carolina Panthers, the Vikings wide receivers against the Los Angeles Chargers, the Rams wide receivers against the 49ers, and the Chiefs wide receivers against the Raiders. Those are all strong matchups. They should be good games to watch. I'm curious to see how well the receivers are going to do against these defenses. But yeah, I was going to put them on my list. Obviously, they're big-time names. Their offenses, high octane. So I couldn't bring myself to do it, but just take note that they might have a pretty rough week this weekend. What do you think?
I think out of the teams you named, there are a couple guys there that I'm nervous about, like the Cardinals. Like, I'm starting Christian Kirk, and there are a couple leagues where I don't know how Christian Kirk's only 53% rostered, by the way. If you can go get him, go get him. He scores double digits almost every single game, even with all the weapons that are there when they're all healthy and in the game. So Christian Kirk is somebody that I think has value. Like DeAndre Hopkins, if he comes back, has the value. So again, you got to play him. I am a little nervous about their matchup. It's a tough matchup, but that offense, even without Hopkins and Murray there, that offense worked and they put up points. So I don't think they're matchup dependent at all. I think that offense is just going to continue to work no matter what. The Cardinals, I'd be playing them. The Chiefs, that makes me nervous because Patrick Mahomes looks so bad. Even Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, I don't know how, is the number 2 receiver in fantasy. He's had like 4 weeks of single digits, but he's had a couple 40-point explosions too. And so, like, you have to play Tyreek Hill, but outside of that, and Travis Kelce, because the upside is ridiculous for both of them. But outside of that, you don't feel confident about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. Like I said, I couldn't bring myself to actually putting them on the official sit-em list, but the pretty damn tough matchups, man. These are top 5 passing defenses against high-octane passing offenses. And you know what they say, defenses win championships, offenses sell tickets. So it'll be interesting to see how they all play out this week, but it could definitely go very wrong for some of these teams this week, and there could be some big-time upsets happening around the league.
Yeah, again.
Yeah. Yeah, just like last weekend. So, all right. Well, that's all we have for you guys this week. We appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully, Hefe and I were able to provide some insight to help get you in an advantage in your fantasy league. As we head down the stretch, remember, keep it competitive, whether you've clinched a playoff spot or you're done. Nobody likes people who stop playing because they absolutely suck. Just remember that. It's real simple.
Very important. Please don't do that.
Yeah, no. It takes the fun out of it. Don't do it. Just play it. It's almost over. Just keep playing. A few more weeks to go. So if you're looking to take your fantasy team to the next level, we offer some premium, exclusive content you can only find on horsemansports.com. Head over there. Check it out. Special limited time founders deal is available. You do not want to miss out on this. That's horsemansports.com, all one word. As always, special shout out to our WUBI Live listeners for tuning in. You can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast and Fantasy Central on WUBI Live every Thursday at now 4 p.m. thanks to daylight savings time. The WUBI Live app is available for download in your app store, or just simply visit WUBI.live, where you can stream over your internet browser. How easy is that, Hefe?
It's as easy as it gets right there.
That is right. So with that said, Hefe, you want to say anything else before we head out of here?
Nope, I got nothing for you guys, man. Just have a good week. Good luck with fantasy this week.
Yeah, good luck to you all this weekend. May the odds forever be in your favor, and we will see you next week for Week 11. Have a good night.